symbolism, abstract storytelling, surrealism, art house movie activate. So we are talking He's Watching, and this one is directed by Jacob Estes and actually stars his children, I believe, as well as a small role for himself. And this is a bizarre, surreal art house found footage movie, sort of. Obviously a low budget, and an interesting choice to have a found footage movie colliding with kind of such strong kind of art house kind of vibes here. We'll talk a little bit about it in just a minute, but I want to give you the kind of the synopsis. So it takes place in a situation where there's been some type of viral outbreak. Now I'm assuming this is probably filmed in COVID, which I'm guessing is the part of the inspiration for this. Now the virus isn't specifically COVID, but it is a very deadly virus. It seems to target specifically adults, and we have a situation where there's two young children and their parents are kind of hospitalised. But this virus has killed a lot of adults. Now the virus itself doesn't actually have much to do with the actual plot itself, if we're honest. I think it's just an excuse to get adults off the board. So the story is really just about these two kind of kids that are having to kind of fend for themselves and really kind of can't call for any type of adult supervision or help. That's really the kind of the reason I think the actual virus kind of storyline is in this movie. And we have a story of these kind of two children, a young boy and his slightly older sister, trying to kind of fend for themselves, and they seem to be menaced by some type of strange kind of demonic entity that seems to actually have a fascination with videoing them. And we have lots of kind of bizarre sequences, which we'll kind of talk about, you know, as the movie progresses and as this review progresses, and we'll kind of discuss that more. Yeah, and that's kind of all I'll say about the plot. So, what can I say that works in this movie's favour? I would say two things for a start. Despite the fact that the director here has cast his children, you know, you could accuse him of nepotism, but I have to say I actually think the young actors did a fairly good job here. So, you know, if you've got the talent in-house, why not use it, eh? In particular, the kind of the young boy, I think, was actually fairly strong, and the older sister was, you know, still pretty good. Her role, I don't think, was quite as well defined as the little boy, but yeah, nonetheless, I think they both did a pretty good job here of making these kind of these quite convincing sort of characters. Now, you could argue that obviously if they're working with their father, it's an easier kind of you know, process, and maybe they're playing more or less themselves. But nonetheless, what we have on screen, I think, are some reasonable performances from kind of young actors that I'm assuming are relatively kind of inexperienced. This is such a low budget movie, but yeah, I thought the acting here was good. The second thing I would say is there is some genuinely unnerving sequences. I don't know if this movie is ever out and out scary, but there are some kind of unnerving sequences where we kind of see things kind of in the background, or we see kind of like, you know, images just lurking slightly out of frame and things are a little bit askew. I think the movie works best when it's a little more grounded, and we do have these elements of the horror elements that are happening to our kind of protagonists in a more of a real world setting, and I'll explain why I'm kind of emphasising that in a minute. But nonetheless, there are a couple of sequences I do feel were genuinely kind of creepy and unnerving, and had a kind of a good kind of foreboding kind of atmosphere here. And there are a couple of kind of costume designs that I thought were quite good and kind of looked kind of quite effective here. And, you know, those of you who like your A24 films and like to go, oh yes, I totally understand where they were going with that. 10 out of 10, yeah, I totally see. Then you probably like this movie, because this is an art house movie's, you know, fans' dream, because it's loads of kind of symbolism and all this and surreal kind of filmmaking, abstract ideas. And I sometimes feel people kind of say they like these things even though they don't really understand it. So let's maybe transition to what I think does not work. This to me, okay, I was trying to think about how can I best describe this movie and what it's like watching it. Imagine if you were out of a friend and this friend vomited all over the place, and then someone asked you, I need you to tell me what they had for dinner in the order that they had it, by kind of looking at the puke that is on the pavement and identifying what they've eaten and in what order. It's kind of what this film's like. It's basically like looking at visual vomit, because it's just loads of kind of stuff thrown at the screen, lots of weird images, lots of abstract ideas, lots of kind of bizarre kind of like camera shots and imagery here, just thrown at the screen almost constantly with kind of odd musical cues, weird lighting, kind of weird dream effects. That's pretty much the movie, with a few kind of like down-to-earth scenes here and there thrown in, but for the most part, yeah, that's kind of what it is. Visual puke is the best way I would describe this. This movie, for me, was quite torturous. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, those of you who really like art house films may like this, but for me, it was just weird. It also totally does not fit with a found footage movie. Speaking of found footage, this movie is one of those films that really cheats in the context of a found footage idea here, because there's plenty of shots that are not found footage. You know, there's so many of them, and when the idea, I think, here is this demon is somehow recording what he's seeing, or what he's seeing through these kids' eyes and stuff like that, and somehow he's got a digital recording of it, whatever. But there's so many sequences and like musical cues and stuff like that. You're just thinking it's kind of a found footage movie, but it's so just kind of like going off the kind of the reservation. Maybe it would have been better to try and film this as a traditional kind of style of filmmaking. I've read somewhere that they basically couldn't afford to do that and get some more money. I really don't think the found footage style of filmmaking suits this type of film. Had this been a traditionally filmed movie, I think maybe you could have got away with some more of the abstract elements, but as a found footage movie, it's just a kind of a abstract mess. Or if you did want to go found footage, maybe dial back a little bit on the art house stuff, because this is a good example. And this movie is clearly made by a tight-knit group of friends and family, and all these guys, they have an idea. Yeah, this is what we're gonna do. Yeah, everyone's got what we're gonna do. Yeah, great idea, Jacob. And then they make this film, and everyone's like, yeah, such a great idea. And you go into it cold as an audience member. You're thinking, what the hell am I watching? It's just a mess. It's just a mess of a film. And again, I see this a lot with indie filmmakers, because they know the direction that they want to go and they know the product they want to make, and to them it makes kind of sense. But when you're watching it cold, it really doesn't. So it's just a kind of hodgepodge of ideas, a hodgepodge of visual kind of like garbage on the screen. With sometimes it kind of looks a little creepy, sometimes it's a bit foreboding. You get occasional kind of sequences where I think the acting is okay. The storyline is just so disengaging, because it's just so interested in having like all these kind of visual stuff on screen. And had this been an art project, if this was in a kind of like a some type of visual museum where it has these like bizarre stuff going on, woo, look at me, woo, so creative, then maybe. But if you're watching this as a movie and you want to follow a kind of an interesting narrative, it only has the odd kind of flack of an idea here and there when it's not too busy showing you a bunch of bizarre stuff. Now I understand that the idea here is this kind of demon is trying to kind of personalise his kind of attack, so to speak, on these kids who are all into kind of vlogging and all this kind of stuff. But what do you want from this movie? Do you want to have a more a commercial film, or do you want to have a piece of art that you want to put in a gallery? Because that's kind of where I would say this movie more is kind of going to be at home, because it's a narrative. And I get people are going to turn around and say, oh yes, well, I understand what the director was going for there. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. This movie is just a hodgepodge of ideas, and someone needed to kind of say, Jacob, I understand what you're doing, booby, but kind of calm down a little bit. Let's think about maybe a bit more of a kind of a narrative that people can kind of follow and understand and stuff like that. Or let's have like a little short that we can stick on some type of art project. As it stands at the moment, it's a hodgepodge of bizarre ideas and kind of imagery. Some of which I appreciate, some of it for artistic value, yeah, that looks kind of, at least, you know, it's a well shot sequence or something like that, or it's a bizarre kind of a haunting kind of scene. But put it together, the narrative is just kind of like forgotten about, and you know, you just can't follow it because you're basically following two young kids who are arguing, shouting, playing instruments for a lot of the time, and it's not doing anything kind of weird and bizarre. It's a real struggle to sit through this one. I don't know. I honestly can't see many people liking this movie, but there's going to be one or two that's going to go, yeah. Where do I score it? I'm going to have to go with 3 out of 10 for this one. It was painful for me to watch this, but there's a couple of things that prevent this from being a lower score, but it's still, to me, for the most part, a pretty kind of bad movie, and I don't think the majority of audiences will get much from this, outside of very, very artistic people who like this kind of thing. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.